Please comment where you are watching in the world. I should have known better, to be honest. That's the part that still burns me when I think about it. All the bad flags were there from the beginning. I just wanted so badly for it to be true that I ignored every single one of them. That's how I got into this crap mess to begin with. The night it started, I was scrolling my dating app, thumb numb from swiping through the same parade of mediocrity. Guys holding up fish. Guys with bathroom selfies and toothpaste smeared on the mirror. Guys who thought 6 feet, don't worry ladies, winky face, was a personality. And then he appeared. The picture looked like it was ripped out of a glossy magazine. A man I recognized instantly. Not Hollywood A-list, but B-list famous. He'd been in a Netflix drama I binged last year, the kind where he played the charming bad boy. He had one of those dangerous smiles, like he knew things he shouldn't. My finger froze above the screen. There was no way. It had to be fake. But the profile wasn't empty. It had details. Springfield, Illinois. Love live music, bar food, and traveling when I can. Looking for someone who doesn't play games. I laughed. Out loud. I even showed it to my roommate. Look at this, I said. Somebody actually made a catfish account with a celebrity. How pathetic. But later, when I was lying in bed and the insomnia hit, I swiped right anyway. I don't know why. Maybe just to see if it would match. Maybe to entertain myself. It matched. Immediately. My heart skipped. And then came the message. Simple. Direct. Hey Abby. You look different from most of the girls on here. Genuine. I stared at it for 10 minutes, waiting for the scam to reveal itself. But the longer I looked, the more I convinced myself maybe it wasn't fake. He didn't drop a cheesy pickup line. He didn't send me a link. He just talked. And God, he was good at it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of messages and late-night texts. He knew things about my city, places only locals would know. He joked about the brutal Illinois winters. He asked about my favorite shows, and when I mentioned one, he quoted lines back to me. It felt personal, like he was listening. I told myself a dozen times it couldn't be real. But every time I wavered, he said something that reeled me back in. When he suggested we meet in person, I almost said no. But then I pictured it. Walking into a restaurant with him, people staring, me laughing at the idea of Abby Harper from nowhere, Illinois, out on a date with a celebrity. I was hooked. We agreed on a diner outside Springfield. Low-key. Out of the way. I like to keep things quiet, he said. Don't want the wrong kind of attention. It made sense. The night of the date, I spent an hour on my makeup, another on my hair, and changed outfits 4 times. By the time I slid into my car, my stomach was in knots. The diner was ordinary, neon buzzing, smell of grease and coffee, booths patched with duct tape. The kind of place I'd been to 100 times. But that night, it felt like a stage. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner booth. For one terrifying second, I thought it really was him. The haircut, the clothes, the grin. My breath caught. Then I got closer, and reality set in. The smile was wrong, too wide, too desperate. The teeth were yellowed. The skin sagged. The eyes, God, the eyes. They were flat and sharp all at once, like a shark's. But he stood up like he'd just won a prize. Abby. His voice was steady, smooth. Too smooth. My throat tightened. You're not who you said you were. He smirked, sliding back into the booth. Of course not. But I know you. And that's when the night turned. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cheap and overpowering. His breath hit my cheek as he spoke. Abigail Harper. Born August 12th. Parents split when you were 11. Brother in Iowa, works construction. You've got $10,000 in your bank account. And, his grin stretched wider. You've got secrets. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Then he listed them. One by one. The arrest in college for public intoxication. A stupid mistake I thought no one remembered. The medical bill I'd fought tooth and nail over last year. And then the affair. The married man I'd slept with 3 years ago. Something I'd buried so deep I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. I felt sick. My hands trembled under the table. How do you know all that? He shrugged, like it was nothing. Doesn't matter. What matters is what I do with it. Unless you want the whole world to know, you're going to give me $10,000. Tonight. My blood roared in my ears. 10 grand. It wasn't impossible. I'd been saving for a down payment. But the certainty in his voice, the way he said it like he owned me, made me feel naked. Exposed. I stammered. I don't. He cut me off with a laugh. Don't bother lying. I've seen the numbers. I know what you've got. And if you don't pay me tonight, I'll send every filthy detail to your job, your family, your friends. Everyone will know what kind of dirty little slut you really are." The word hit me like a slap. Slut. He said it with relish, like he'd been waiting to use it. His eyes crawled over me, slow, invasive. "Bet you liked sneaking around. Bet you still do. That's why you dressed up for me, huh? Tight dress, painted lips, you knew exactly what you were doing." My cheeks burned. The humiliation was worse than the fear. He was enjoying this, watching me squirm, savoring it. Something inside me clicked. If I broke down, he'd win. If I screamed, he'd spin it. The only chance I had was to play along. I forced a smile, even as bile rose in my throat. "Fine. I'll transfer it. Right now." He smirked, pulling out his phone. "Good girl. Do it." My hands shook as I unlocked mine. The banking app glowed. I pretended to type, but under the table, my thumb flew across the screen, opening my messages instead. I typed to my best friend Rachel, "Call the police. I'm in danger. Diner. Now." Then I flipped back to the banking app and tapped nonsense, just enough to make it look real. A fake processing bar spun slowly. I angled the phone toward him. "There. Done." He snatched it, eyes scanning. My chest clenched. If he swiped one screen too far, he'd see the message. But after a tense second, he grinned, tossing it back. "Smart girl. Knew you'd behave." I nodded, swallowing bile. "So we're done." He leaned in again, breath sour against my ear. "Almost. But if you so much as whisper about this, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of whore you are. I'll ruin you." The words dripped with glee. He wanted me broken. He wanted me scared. And for a moment I was. Then the diner doors slammed open. Heavy footsteps. Sharp voices. "Police! Hands where we can see them." His face went white. He lurched to his feet, chair scraping, but 2 officers were already there, slamming him against the floor. Diners gasped. Someone clapped. My phone buzzed with Rachel's reply. "Hang on. They're there. You're safe." You ever get a little gift that feels like a joke at first, and then like the start of something you don't want to know the ending of? That key, a plain, stupid metal key in a black box, landed in my lap like that, and I've been tiptoeing around my own house ever since. Name's Claire. I'm from Wisconsin, born and raised not too far from Madison, so I know how to read people who mean you well and people who don't. I matched this guy, Tom, on some app. We flirted about dumb stuff, who eats the last brat at a tailgate, then agreed to meet for lunch at a local place. He was on time, scruffy in a way that worked, not the fake effort most guys put in. He had this almost boyish smile that made me expect a story, and then tell it twice. Lunch was easy until he reached into his bag and slid a little black box across the table like it wasn't anything at all. "No build-up." "No, I got you something," flourish. It was just there, honest as a coin on the counter. I opened it because you do that on a date sometimes. You open small surprises to see if they're thoughtful or tacky. Inside was a single key. One of those generic silver house keys with a sticker on the bow. No handwriting on the sticker, just blocky numbers like a hardware tag. He watched me, not smiling, like he was waiting for my reaction. I laughed because laughing felt safer than asking. "What the hell is this?" "It's for later," he said, calm as a lake at dawn. "For later?" I parroted, because that'll get you anywhere with a man who thinks cryptic is cute. "You'll see," he waved like it was nothing. Then he ordered dessert, and we pretended we hadn't put this thing into the middle of the table. I left with the key in my jacket pocket, because what else do you do? Throw it at him and run? Ask a whole stranger to explain himself in public? I parked, turned the engine off, and felt the metal pressing cold against my thigh, a physical ping that said, "Pay attention." I texted a friend on the drive home. "Weird guy gave me a key, lol." Her reply was a string of laughing emojis, and I almost believed it. Almost. Next morning, the little things started stacking. A car I didn't recognize sitting a few houses down, not parked for a minute, just hanging out like someone wanted to watch headlights. I told myself it was coincidence. Wisconsin winters teach you to distrust coincidence, too. You learn to be practical about the oddities. But the car stayed for 2 days. The third day, when I came home from work, there was a folded piece of paper tucked under my doormat. It read "For later" in block letters, the same bluntness as the sticker on the key. That was the kind of detail that flips you from amused to alert. I picked the paper up with 2 fingers like it might bite. No signature, no phone number, no joke. I put the note in the junk drawer where we keep takeout menus and extra batteries, and I put the key inside my sock drawer because putting it on the counter felt like an invitation. I called Tom. He didn't answer. I texted. Read, but no reply. That night the gate to my backyard, the little chain link thing I keep locked because raccoons are determined creatures, was hanging open. It's the kind of gate that sticks if you don't grease the hinges in spring. This time, it was simply not latched. I walked the perimeter with a flashlight, teeth clacking in my head not from cold but adrenaline. Nothing was missing. No obvious footprints. But somebody had been in the yard. The key became a weight. I got a locksmith to check my exterior locks. He laughed at the key, said it was probably blank, cut off a common bitting, but he did me the favor of sweeping through the house and telling me what could be done. New cylinders, a deadbolt, a camera. Practical measures, Wisconsin sensible. The locksmith's truck smelled like oil and peppermint, and he gave me his card with a shrug that said, "Folks do weird stuff." That made it worse and better at the same time. Confirmation without melodrama. Then the messages began. Plain texts from an unknown number. "Did you try it yet?" one said. No context. No follow-up. My hands went ice. I did not try it. What would I even try it on? My front door? The gate? Some locker downtown? The imagination, notoriously inventive, fetched up scenarios fast and foul. Storage units, safes, trunks, the back door of some place I didn't want to know about. I showed the text to my friend Jen. She said, "Honey, you gotta block and report," which is the advice you hear in sitcoms and then think, yeah, okay. I followed it. Blocked. Reported. Felt like I'd closed a bandage on a cut and not stitched anything. The next week I started sleeping with the second light on. You learn to do small, old-fashioned things in Wisconsin to feel safe. Lock both deadbolts, tuck curtains, keep the porch light on until dawn. I rewired my day in tiny ways, leaving for work earlier, parking under a street lamp. Actions that are as sensible as putting salt on an icy step, but they also remind you how much you've lost in terms of carefree. The key had stolen some of my easy. I thought about confronting Tom. The image of me walking into that cafe and slamming his phone on the table felt, for all its movie drama, like the wrong move. Someone who leaves a key on a table and a note under a mat probably didn't want a scene. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to be tangled up. I was smarter than that. Wisconsin's not all earnestness, but we're good at waiting, watching, doing the chores of safety without show. So I did chores. I installed a cheap doorbell camera with the help of a YouTube how-to and some swear words. I put a motion light over the back gate. I replaced the cheap deadbolt with something the locksmith nodded at approvingly. I left a package outside where he could see it through the camera one afternoon, and when he parked there, the car I'd seen before, I called the police. They came, took a report, looked at my footage, and told me to keep everything I had. They wouldn't do much without more. Bureaucracy is the same in Madison as it is in any place. Efficient in paperwork, not always fast in action. It was both comforting and infuriating. Weeks of this made me paranoid in the way that becomes ordinary. My mother told me to come over for supper, fish fry, and I almost said no because I didn't want to leave the house unlocked. But I went because living like a shuttered house feels like admitting defeat. Besides, all this hiding makes you small in ways that bother you more than pretending you're brave. One dry, bright afternoon, I finally answered the question in the only way that made sense for me. Not by using the key on some imagined lock, but by taking control of the narrative. I took a photo of the key, the sticker number visible, and I posted it to a local community board with a note. Found / given on date. Do you know anything about this? Maybe naive, maybe bold. People answered. Someone said the sticker matched a batch used by a storage unit chain 2 towns over. I called that chain. They were polite. No one had tried to open a unit with that tag number. Maybe it was a dead end. Maybe it was something else. But it was a start. I never found out if Tom thought the key was cute, romantic, or sinister. He never replied to the report I filed. He didn't just know my name. By the time he sat down across from me, he'd already put it on everything that mattered. That's the moment you realize a stranger moved faster than you thought possible, and faster than anyone should. It was a rainy Thursday night that made the city smell like wet vinyl and overpriced perfume. The bar Liam picked looked like an Instagram post someone had staged and then pretended to find by accident. Lots of plants, low lights, the kind of vintage furniture that costs a sympathy paycheck. He showed up in a dark sweater and clean white sneakers, and for the first 10 minutes, he was the kind of company you let your guard down for. Funny in a dry way, smart without trying too hard, the kind of talk that slides into flirt and back again without getting sticky. We traded stories about dumb roommates and the worst shows we'd binged. At some point we clinked glasses, and the conversation felt like it might become the kind people tell their friends about. "Oh yeah, remember that night?" I leaned back, told him about a terrible festival where my phone died and I lost my shoes, and he laughed exactly the way I liked. He smelled like coffee and something woody. When he moved in close to hear me over the music, I thought, okay, maybe this could be fun. I kissed him when the moment felt right, soft, tentative, more curiosity than heat. He tasted like bourbon and a little cigarette smoke. Nothing about the kiss suggested there was anything sinister under the surface. Then he pulled his phone out like he was about to show me a band or a terrible meme. Instead, he turned it so I could see. The lock screen was a banking app. My last name was in the account header. I blinked. What? Came out like a question I was asking myself instead of him. He swiped, like revealing cards in a magician's trick. Driver's license. Email preview. Everything bore my surname. It wasn't some sloppy Photoshop. The numbers in the bank app moved in real time. The holographic sheen on the license caught the candlelight. The email list had unread messages from that morning. He looked at me and smiled as if he'd just told a joke. "I thought it would be fun," he said. "Figured we'd skip the small talk." My stomach did that hollow sinking thing. I have a weirdly specific last name. Not super common, not impossible to Google, but normally not something anyone would just stumble upon in a dim bar. My dating profile had my first name and a few photos and nothing else. I had deliberately kept things vague, small-town cautious about how much of myself I put on the internet. The only place my last name existed recently was on a reservation I made the week before. I'd typed it for the Hostess app, because whatever, it was easier than spelling it out over the phone. He must have seen it. "How did you?" I started, but he flashed that calm grin and tucked his phone away like it was nothing personal, just another trick in his pocket. He went back to telling some story about a concert in Ohio, like the fact he'd just shown me forged, or frighteningly real. Documents was no more unusual than the song on the jukebox. I didn't want to make a scene. There's a small, stupid etiquette that keeps you from screaming in public when your brain tells you to. I let the rest of the night happen in a blur of polite conversation, my mind doing the math. Reservation app, visible at hostess station, someone glances, someone decides to weaponize a name. It felt too calculated to be coincidence and too fast to be anything but deliberate. When I replay it, I remember the details like a forensic snapshot. The little scar on his thumb, the way he tapped his foot to the beat, the soft crease by his left eye when he smiled. I remember the click of my fork against the plate and how suddenly food tasted like metal. I drove home with my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, checking the rear view like a paranoid movie extra. The next morning my phone buzzed with a new message. A selfie of him in a coffee shop, smiling like he'd just made himself a private joke. "Good morning, Mrs. My last name," he wrote. No emoji. No follow-up. Just that line, casual and confident, as if he'd already decided on our title. That was the last message I needed. I deleted the conversation, closed the app, and muted my phone until my thumb cramped from holding it too long. Blocking him felt like locking the door after the thief had already scoped the house. It was a move you make to feel safer, rather than a solution to anything. I spent the rest of the week doing the practical, stupid things you do when a stranger has taken a piece of you. I called my bank, asked about odd logins and names. I checked my credit report. I went to the DMV site and triple-checked what could be done to prevent someone from opening accounts in my name. The answers were performative: change passwords, call this number, freeze your identity. All the standard issue commands that make you feel like you're stepping into bureaucracy instead of safety. None of those steps erased the image of him swiping his phone like a magician, or the way his eyes lit up when he said my name with a possessive grin. Blocking him was a silence that felt thin and temporary. I changed passwords. I canceled one mystery charge that might have been his curiosity or a test. I told 2 friends who told me to be careful, and then told me I was overreacting, but also to text them if anything felt off. I slept with the bedroom light on for 2 nights, and in the half-wake hours I imagined finding a letter addressed to me at my front door telling me I was part of his collection now. The worst thing was the small, slow erosion, trust in banal interactions. I found myself avoiding reservations under my full name, using nicknames or initials, refusing to hand over credit card details that had my surname printed on them. Picking up the phone to schedule a dentist appointment felt loaded, because someone might be listening. I thought about confrontation, storming back to the bar, slamming his phone on the table and demanding answers. But confrontation felt dangerous, and there was a clarity in that instinctive fear that kept me quiet. You ever sit across from someone and feel like you're a substitute teacher in their memory class? That was me, James, at a lunch spot off Division, thinking I'd meet someone normal, and leaving with my skin crawling and my closet suddenly suspect. I'm Chicago-born, not the downtown tourist kind, the neighborhood's kind. I know how to read people a block away, how to tell when someone's lying by the angle of their jaw. Michelle's profile looked fine, vintage vibe, a few thrifted outfits, a laugh in the photos. We messaged like normal people do, music, sports, dumb jokes about deep dish versus thin crust. She said she liked old movies and thrift stores. I liked sneakers and not being bored. 2 weeks later, we met for a late lunch at a place that smells like garlic and espresso, windows that catch the light just right, and crews of students with laptops in the corner. She walked in, and my first thought was simple. She looked like her pictures. Oversized sweater, hair in a messy bun, that kind of look that's all effortless until you see it practiced. She waved and sat down like she owned the booth. Nice smile. I ordered. We talked. Small talk turned into stories. Then she did something that didn't feel small at all. She slid her phone across the table, like she was showing me a meme. Look at this, she said. On the screen was a photo of a guy. Same haircut I had at the time. Short on the sides, longer on top. Same height, same jawline if you squinted. He was wearing a dark green button-up, exactly the one I'd bought last month. I blinked. I told myself it could be coincidence. People wear similar shirts, whatever. Maybe he was a friend. Maybe it was a stock photo. I smiled, trying to act casual. She didn't let me get away with casual. She named him like it was a cue. That's Ben, she said, like I should know him. We used to go to that bar on Foster all the time. She told a story about a night they got kicked out because of karaoke, and how they hotly debated which Chicago pizza joint was sacrilege. Her voice folded in the details like she was remembering from a scrapbook she carried in her head. Problem was I never met Ben. I never went to that bar on Foster. I don't remember a karaoke fight. I tried to steer the conversation back to safe stuff, favorite bands, where I grew up, but every time I did, she'd slide another memory into place. Remember that time you took the bus and left your wallet on the seat? She'd say, and I'd freeze because I didn't remember. She'd correct herself sometimes, switch a you to a he like she was editing on the fly, but the stories kept piling up. Past tense memories meant for someone else were being rehearsed at my table. It was subtle at first, just weird flexes, like she'd been remodeling a house of memories, and I was the unfinished room. She asked about small things. Did I wear glasses sometimes? I do. What cologne do I like? A cheap one my dad got me. She asked about my haircut, my watch. Little inventory questions. Innocent but precise. It felt like someone building a collage with my features pasted in. Near the end of lunch, she leaned forward and said, "It's almost the same." Her voice dropped, like she was tasting the fit and deciding if I was a close enough match. That line, almost the same, sat in my chest the rest of the day. I drove home along Lakeshore Drive with the skyline blurred and realized I was shaking. In Chicago, we learned to shrug off strange. We're used to characters. But there was a kind of method to Michelle's weirdness that felt careful, like a hobby with rules. I started going back through our messages with the kind of desperation you reserve for lost wallets. There it was, the questions I'd answered: haircut, watch, the occasional mention of cologne. At the time, they'd seemed like harmless chat. Now they read like a shopping list. She'd been gathering details before she ever stepped into the booth. She had been grooming me, layering traits until I fit an outline she liked. The days after I stopped wearing the green shirt, I tossed it into the back of my closet like evidence. I stopped posting photos with my face centered like a billboard. I changed how I walked down the street, kept my head up, my shoulders not too relaxed. I untagged myself from a check-in at a bar I visited once. The paranoia makes you do petty, boring things that feel like protection. You'd think I'd go full drama, confront her, call her out, go viral for being a weirdo catcher, but that felt dangerous. Michelle seemed calm the way someone who's used to getting what she wants is calm. Confrontation would feed the performance. Instead, I ghosted. I didn't reply. I left the message hanging like a coat on a chair. For a while I felt like a coward. Then I felt like a survivor. I told a buddy from work, a Chicago guy who's seen his share of nonsense. He shrugged, said, "People get weird online, man." But his tone didn't dismiss the chill in my voice. He said to keep an eye on things, check my socials, and don't be dumb. Practical, Chicago. Direct. We grabbed beers and talked about other things, but the beer couldn't soak away the way my life had folded into someone else's script. Weeks passed, and I still saw the residue. The urge not to wear the shirt, the itch to change my haircut, the odd wonder what would happen if I did put the green shirt on and walked into a bar that used to be ours. Would she look up, blink, and say, "Close enough?" Would she smile like she'd found the replacement? The thought made my stomach drop into my shoes. What scares you isn't only what she did. It's the idea that someone could sculpt you without breaking a bone. She wasn't violent, not outwardly. She was a craftsman of small inheritances, taking a shape and asking the world to place another face inside it. That's a kind of possession you don't always see coming. It's wearing the same shirt as someone else, and realizing someone else already thought to fill that shirt with a past. So now I wear the green shirt sometimes, at night when I'm too tired to play it safe. I put on my messy jacket and stand under the L, watch the trains rattle above, and decide whether the choice is mine or theirs. I walk through Wicker Park and let the neighborhood be noisy and real. I tell myself the small stuff is livable, being stared at, being compared, being almost the same. But daughter, son, whatever, if someone tries to fit you into their personal archive, shut the book. Lock it. Burn it if you have to. You ever get that gut slam feeling, like a subway car coming to a sudden stop, and know right then you're in the wrong story? That was me sitting in that coffee shop across from Mike, and I still feel the skid. Name's Tasha. New York bred. I move fast, I trust my eyes, and I don't let folks rearrange my life without me knowing. I met Mike on a dating app. He seemed normal enough. Guy from Brooklyn, talked about cameras, vinyl, and obscure bars. He messaged like a human, no bumper sticker poetry, no weird lists of deal breakers. We set up a Saturday at this plant-heavy cafe on the corner of a block that smells like roasted coffee and laundry detergent. Daylight through a window is where I sit. Light's honest. You can see the real person. He shows up clean, navy windbreaker, jeans that fit right, like he's had the photo in his head and matched the outfit to the lighting. He's pleasant. He laughs at the right times. We trade the usual city small talk. Where you from? Who you work for? Which bar has the worst band last month? The easy stuff. I felt okay. Not thrilled, just okay. That's how bad dates start, and how worse ones hide their teeth. Then he asks for a photo. Look, people ask to take pics all the time. Hey, can I snap one? I say yes sometimes, why not? But Mike didn't ask casual. He said, hold that. No, but really, tilt your chin like that. A little more. Perfect. He used the soft voice photographers use when they want you to think it's art. He crouched, got low, angling the phone like he was hunting for the perfect frame. He moved my coffee, nudged the sugar jar, slid the napkin 2 inches, all like choreography. I laughed it off. I let him do it. But his face when he took the photos was flat, like someone pressing buttons with throttle control. He took 50 pictures. 50. He kept adjusting me. Look at me. No, look right there. Angle your hand, he muttered, almost sotto voce. There was a pattern to how he moved me. It wasn't compliments or flirtation. It was mechanical. I felt like someone being dressed by a stylist who thought I was a mannequin. After he said casual, I'm doing a series. Same composition. Different faces. It's about constancy. He said constancy like a math problem. He sounded proud. I smiled. I left thinking, weird but fine. People have projects. In New York, everybody's got projects. 2 days later, I'm bored on the subway, and I clicked the Instagram he linked. I thought I'd see grainy film photos, some moody landscapes. What I saw made my scalp prickle. Rows. Rows of women. Different faces but the same scene. Window table, cup in the left hand, sugar jar at the same angle, light from the same side. Hair behind the ear. Left elbow resting on the table. The same small coffee shop props repeated like a template. Scroll, scroll, scroll. 8, maybe 10 women in the same posture. My stomach dropped, and I felt suddenly stupid for ever leaning in for that perfect shot. There were pictures of women who looked like cousins, but not the same person. Some smiling, some pretending not to notice the camera. Each photo captioned with something neutrally dull, Saturday city morning. Nothing personal. Nothing to explain why someone would recreate the exact same pose with different people until it read like an archive. So I texted him. Nice shots. Felt like bait. He sent back nothing weird. Just an emoji. Then he said offhand, gotta make sure it matches the others. A whisper. Not to me. To the phone. But I heard it. My throat tightened like I'd swallowed a pebble. You ever have that instinctive NYC reaction? Freeze, then check, then move? I did it in a second. I went back through his feed, zooming in on the sugar jar placement, the reflection of the window, the little scuff on the table. The same scene, slightly altered with a different face. It was like he was cataloging people. Like he had a spreadsheet in his head and was slotting names into boxes. I felt violated. Not in the physical way. He didn't touch me rough, didn't follow me home, but in that small, intimate way where someone collects pieces of you without permission. He'd taken my movements, my posture, and fitted them into a project that made me replaceable. I'm not delicate. I've lived in this city long enough to know how to hold my own. But there's something about being used as a repeat in someone else's gallery that sits wrong deep in your chest. Being New York tough doesn't mean you don't feel small. It means you hold the smallness and keep moving. But I couldn't ignore it. I wanted to rage. I wanted to go back to the cafe, storm in, yank his phone and smash it on the table, make a scene, make him explain himself. Instead, I did a quieter thing, the thing that actually felt smart. I cut contact. I deleted his number. I unlinked his profile. I changed my settings. I avoided window seats like they'd been booby-trapped. That's the other thing, people tell you to confront. People love confrontation, they think it's brave. But confrontation gives attention. Attention is oxygen. And this felt like a small fire started for attention. He had a sneaky way of making himself important by collecting. I refused to feed that. A week later I checked his feed, like an idiot, and sure enough, another woman, same table, same stupid sugar jar angle. Time-stamped. The photo was from the day he'd photographed me. I shut my phone and sat on the subway with my heart doing rounds like a cab circling for a fare. I felt furious. I felt small. I felt exposed in a city where exposure usually comes with flashing lights and photographers' credit lines, not with strangers quietly slotting you into a set. I don't know who those other women are. Maybe they're in on it. Maybe they answered an ad. Maybe they're regulars or bored or paid models. Maybe some of them feel the way I do. Maybe none of them do. Maybe Mike thinks he's an artist and everyone else is the canvas. Doesn't matter. The point is this: someone decided my pose was replaceable. This one's the kind of date that reads like a rom-com on paper and a cautionary tale in practice. I'll keep it raw, honest, and with the kind of adult humor that lets you laugh so you don't cry into the breadbasket. I'd just come out of a long marriage. Nothing cinematic, no baseball field confessions, no slow-mo breakup montage, just years of sameness that had ossified into polite cohabitation. I moved back to India at 38, single for the first real time in forever, and I gave Bumble a shot because apparently the universe now does matchmaking via tiny photographs and excessively enthusiastic bios. I was rusty. My flirting skills were like a flip phone in the smartphone era, functional but embarrassing. Enter Priya. She was 38 as well, which I liked because it meant fewer reality TV-style games and more of the we can stay up late and talk about literature energy. Her photos were good, not retouched into oblivion, not trying to pass off a filtered selfie as a personality. We texted for a week, then called. We spent hours on the phone before we met, 3-4-hour calls, the kind where the battery warning becomes a plot point and you start rationing your voice like it's artisanal jam. Here's the thing about Priya, she was shockingly forthcoming. I mean shockingly. She would narrate a memory the way a chef lists ingredients, and every single one was trauma seasoning. Alcoholism, alleged date rape, non-consensual sex, a run of abusive exes who, to hear her tell it, had all been somewhere on the spectrum between reckless and serially catastrophic. It was raw, it was unvarnished, and I'll admit I carried a fragile curiosity for people who'd survived the trenches and still had a sense of humor about the mud. Are you okay? I asked on the third call, because a human being has a duty to check their own inbox before they become a therapist. Yes, she said, suddenly bright. But only if you can hold my emotional baggage while I do a spontaneous TED talk about my ex-husband's sister's dabbling in witchcraft. You in? She was half joke, half serious, and that right there should have been my first clue alongside the size of the bloom on the weirdness bouquet. But my loneliness had the attention span of a puppy. I agreed. I booked a hotel. I wore a shirt that still smiled like I had my life together. Our first real date went really well. The chemistry was, bless it, immediate. She ate sushi like a woman who'd been deprived, laughed like the joke landed in a different zip code, and slept over. Not slept over, as in one awkward couch nap, she stayed 2 nights. Which, if we're being honest, is a bold move from a woman who's been telling you about ex-husbands and alleged date rapes before you've demonstrated a reliable breakfast ordering system. We fell into a rhythm that made sense in the moment. Long conversations, shared playlists, an intimacy made not of sex but of confessions. At midnight, the hotel room phone would ring. The first night I laughed it off as hotel quirk, maybe a wrong number, someone selling extended stay packages. The second night it rang, and she smirked like it had always been part of the show. The third night, it rang again at 12:07 a.m., and she left the room 10 minutes later and came back smelling of city air and diesel perfume. Then, as I was packing to head home, 2 days in, feeling like I'd lived 2 different timelines, she called me. I was on the bus, the countryside sliding by like a watercolor. "I love you," she said. No preface, no stage setting, just the words dropped like a lightning bolt in a dry field. This is where adult humor becomes survival technique. It landed in my chest like a surprise tax bill. You hadn't planned for it, but now it's definitely yours. I laughed because that's what you do when your face is a live broadcast and your brain hasn't caught up. "Whoa," I said, which is the single most adult response you can give to someone saying they love you after 48 hours and 2 late-night ringtones. "We just met." I meant it gently, but she didn't take it gently. She took it like a cue. A week later I went back. I told myself I was keeping an open mind, that modern relationships move at the speed of memes and microwave burritos, and that maybe love can bloom overnight if the soil's right. We had a second date in her town, and booked another budget swank hotel. That night, at 1 a.m., she had a coffee craving. I called room service, expecting a civilized delivery. She looked at me and said, "No, let's walk." We walked through streets that had the charm of low-light theater. Stray dogs with more confidence than sense, men pretending to be lost and asking for directions as a form of flattery, and a broken clay sculpture in a roundabout that made me think of a Picasso panel cartoon. She stopped there, pointed, and said, deadpan, "This is where a date didn't go well." I was groped here. My legs were shaking the size of overcooked spaghetti. I was stunned. I had been accustomed to her telling me dark things, but hearing it in the moment, live-action trauma confession, turned the whole walk into a sort of living podcast of misfortune. We walked on. She began to flirt with the idea that some local statues were possessed. "My ex-husband's sisters were into witchcraft," she murmured with a twinkle. She liked the darkness. She vamped it up the way some people like to vamp up a salad with feta. I joked back, because what else are you supposed to do? Make jokes in dangerous streets, and she laughed like I'd tossed in a perfectly seared crouton. By the time we stumbled back to the hotel, it was late enough for the city to be asleep and early enough for paranoia to wear a tux. The phone in the room rang at 2:30 a.m. again. It rang every night she stayed. It started to feel less like a quirk and more like a theme song to a very bad indie film. On the final morning, I told her I wasn't ready for heavy commitments. I explained in the bland, polite way adults explain they can't do a medium-rare heart at that stage in life. "I'm yours," she said. "You don't get to be half in." Here comes the adult humor. I'd like to think I responded with the kind of mature clarity you find on the back of Matchbox toys. Instead, I said something like, "You sure you don't want a nice hobby instead of a marriage? Knitting? Bonsai?" Not my finest rhetorical hour. She took it badly. She took everything badly that didn't explicitly worship her damn self. After I left that time, the dreams began. Not the fun, whiskey-fueled sex dreams you mistakenly tell your mate about and then regret for 2 weeks. The feverish, disorienting kind where her voice echoes and the hotel phone rings in the distance. I started waking up sweaty, clutching the blanket like it might explain consent to me. My friends noticed. I noticed. I stopped going on dates. The idea of someone saying, "I love you," like an unscheduled parcel made my chest constrict the way a badly tried polo shirt does at the shoulders. 2 months later, I was still dodging the idea of intimacy like it was a hornet's nest. "All right, pull up a chair and pour yourself something cold. This one still makes my jaw tighten when I think on it." I was about 21 and looking younger than I was, bless my baby face, fresh into college life and dumb as a box of rocks about online hookups. Grindr was the new frontier for that summer. Lots of sweaty small talk, a mess of ego and awkward flirting, and me feeling like I'd finally caught a wave of confidence. I wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble found me anyway. He messaged me with a display name like a bad joke, Dad for Young. Now, that should have been the first red light the size of a barn. But I was naive and polite. Southern socialization will do that to you. And I didn't want to be rude. So I answered. He was 54, his profile said the younger the better, and his only photo was a zoomed-in blurry chest shot. I rolled my eyes, kept talking for a minute because, hell, I didn't want to be mean. And that was mistake number one. We exchanged a handful of messages. I told him I was a student, didn't say which school. That's important. I didn't give him the keys to my life. Grindr's location thing is weird but useful. It'll show how far folks are from you. At first it read, 25 miles, like he was some tourist on a joyride. Fine. Then, 20 minutes after we'd been chatting, he pinged me again. Hey, I'm on my way out this way, smiley face. I didn't answer, figured he'd get bored. I looked at his profile again out of curiosity, and it said 3 miles. I felt that cold little prickle at the back of my neck, and set my phone down. Now y'all, I want to be clear, I'd never told him my college name, never told him where I lived, never told him I lived on the residential campus. But Grindr's tracking is a little too good sometimes. When you're within a couple miles, it'll get real specific. I went back to my books, tried to shake it off. Didn't work. 30 minutes later he messaged, hey, my name. Got a wild hair. I'm driving out to your college tonight, smiley face. That, friends, is when the hair on my arm stood up like a rooster. I opened his profile again like I wanted to see a ghost, and it had dropped to a little over 2,500 feet. My hands went cold. I texted a buddy who lived across the hall and told him I was just gonna study, shut up the light, the whole bit. He waved it off. He thought I was being dramatic. Only I wasn't. The next message came fast. No fun if you don't play along. What building on the residential campus are you in? Every time I refreshed his profile, the distance ticked down. 2,100 feet, 900 feet, 310 feet. Think about that. Someone somewhere was closing the circle on me without me knowing where they were. It felt like being watched by a storm. My roommate was out of town that weekend on some kind of retreat, so it was just me and the houseplants. I shut the blinds, turned my lights off, locked and deadbolt the door, locked the bedroom door, turned my phone to silent. Did every little thing they teach you to do in the safety pamphlets you get in orientation, but never expect to use. I sat on my bed and stared at the dark like it was a person. He kept messaging every minute, a flashing electric beep in my left pocket. I'm outside your dorm. Where are you? I can find you. Smile, smiley face. The tone was sick, half playful, half threatening, and the more I ignored it, the angrier he got. I panicked. I deleted my whole profile like that would sever the tether between us. For a night it worked. The messages stopped. I slept in fits, dreams full of someone standing just outside my window. For 3 days, I didn't touch the app. I told myself I was done with the reckless bullshit. Then curiosity, and the stubborn little voice that thinks it can fix everything, got the better of me. I reinstalled Grindr and this time took my time. I dug through settings like I was patching up a leaky roof. I turned location sharing off where I could, tweaked privacy filters, set my profile to private, locked down pictures. This is the part they don't tell you when you first download these apps. There are tiny little toggles that'll make you far less discoverable if you know to flick M. Felt smug for all of 5 minutes. Later that first evening back, I opened the app and there he was again, same gross chest photo, different username, Wolfindu. My stomach dropped. He'd made a second account. He blew up my messages like a flare. You messed up. Almost got the police called on me cause of you. I was outside other dorms. I'm coming for you. The threats were specific. The voice in text was flat, casual. He said he'd been to other dorms looking for me. He told me he'd been outside someone else's dorm and told them to leave or he'd call the cops. He was stalking around like he was hunting for sport. I stomped on my phone like that would squash him. I blocked the account. I deleted Grindr again and somehow felt both terrified and humiliated. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor in the fluorescent glare of the microwave thinking, you're 21. You are lucky your idiot brain played polite. But luck is thin as tissue paper. The reality was I'd been naive, and naive gets you followed. I still remember the little ritual I'd built for myself when I was 19 and waiting tables. Get in the car, lock the door in one smooth motion, crank the radio just loud enough to drown out whatever part of the night tried to stick to you. It made me feel safe. It helped me believe I was in charge of my little slice of evening. That's why the way his hand yanking at my car door made the world tilt felt like something from a movie. The wrong kind of movie. He'd been a regular at the restaurant, The kind of customer who learned your name without putting effort into it. He called me by a pet name that made my skin go cold every time he used it. At first, it was just annoying. A man about 21 wanting to date a 17-year-old waitress. I kept my distance. I stopped taking his tables when I could. I smiled and said, "No thanks," when he asked for my number. You do that thing where you think if you ignore it, it'll get bored and go away. 2 weeks later, the restaurant got robbed. There were whispers, police asking questions, people were rattled. I did the normal thing. I turned over my texts, the messages, everything I had to the chief, hoping something would stick and he'd be gone. He slithered away, like an oil slick under a floorboard. That made me keep my eyes open but not paranoid, just sensible. Then he messaged me on Facebook years later, all smiles and claims about fancy acreage and mysterious top-secret projects. I didn't answer, but the feeling that he could be anywhere and might decide to come back was there like a dull hum. The night he actually came back into my life, not through messages but banging on my door, is a memory I can still smell. The chlorine of the pool up the street, the tang of the cheap air freshener the complex management liked, the faint bacon smell from the downstairs flat. I was living alone then, newly independent, sleeping with my sliding glass patio door screen shut, but unlocked for the breeze. My oldest was at his dad's that weekend. My youngest was asleep upstairs. I'd had a typical evening out with friends, and come in early to be a responsible parent. I remember thinking, as I drifted off, that the apartment felt very small and mine. That feeling lasted until a heavy pressure landed where my back had been. I woke to the weight of someone sitting on the bed. For a foggy second I thought it was my son, the way your brain latches on to the familiar in the panic. I rolled over, and my heart did a very bad thing. There was Mario, not the polite, sometimes clumsy sort of guy I'd dated, a different version. Clean-shaven, breathing like he'd walked a long way, eyes bright and not quite right. He didn't speak at first. He just sat there in the dark like someone who'd taken a seat in the wrong theater and decided to stay for the intermission. "What are you doing?" I managed. My voice sounded too small for the room. "I needed to talk to you," he said, like it was the most reasonable sentence in the world. That was the moment the rational checklist in my head practically turned cartwheels. Call the police? Wake the neighbor? Sprint, naked, into the stairwell? Grab my kid? All of it blurred into a bad action sequence I didn't want to star in. Instead, I did something painfully boring. I stayed calm and negotiated. "You could have called," I said. "You could have texted. You don't just come in." He blinked slow, the way someone blinks when they're trying to remember which story to tell. That's the other dangerous thing about him. The way he'd switch from guy next door to predator, so quick your eyes barely registered the shape change. He said, "I didn't have your number. I needed to talk." His hand slid to my shoulder, which chilled me the way a winter breeze chills you through a jacket. He started rubbing my shoulders like he was trying to soothe someone who'd been out in a storm. It was a touch that should have been comforting on a normal day. Here it felt like the hands of someone checking the locks on a cage. I told him calmly that we could talk tomorrow. He didn't argue. He moved closer, put his face near mine like he was going to whisper a secret, and started to trail his hand over my neck. "Do you want to talk now?" he murmured. It felt like someone closing a book on the last page. I told him to leave. He stood, walked to the sliding door, the same door I used to lock in a practice sweep, and slipped out by the patio, jumping the low wall like it was the easiest thing in the world. I checked on my son first because the primal part of me wanted to make sure the world I'd built for him wasn't shattered. He slept, oblivious and safe. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off and waited until the sun came up to call anyone at all. I didn't call the police that night. It wasn't because I thought it was no big deal. It was because I was scared of what would happen if I called. I knew, in the odd, bottom-of-the-stomach way you know things, that he had a gun. The police, in my mind, were more theater than protection. I pictured him getting released and coming back angrier. I called the friend who was big and loud and made him promise to park his truck in my lot for a few nights. He did. It felt like having a small fortress. So, I'd just come out of something gnarlier than a bus route in a snowstorm. Freshish from a breakup, feeling like a hollowed-out flat white, and persuaded by mates that Match.com wasn't just for pensioners and tax lads. You know the drill. You set up your profile, pick photos where you don't look like a mugshot, and hope someone witty replies. She did. Linda. Nice enough name. Decent banter. Not one of those bio-tragedies. She actually seemed like a person. After a couple of weeks of polite back and forth, we decided to meet. She picks the bar, a cozy local, not too flashy, with a playlist of indie bangers and a barman who pours pints with the solemnity of a priest. I get there early, nervy, palms dry like I'd been standing on the tube platform too long. She arrives, not quite as in the photos. We've all been catfished by filters at some point, but pleasant enough. We make small chat, the sort you swap when you're testing the water for sharks. She's funny in that dry, sharp way, and for a minute I think, right, this will be easy. We drink, we laugh, we mock the mad bloke 2 stools over who's singing something about his ex. All very normal, innit? Then somehow, over the course of 3 pints and a shared plate of nachos, her conversation turns like a big pivot door. She starts asking about money. Not subtle stuff like, what do you do? But the sort of curious prodding that softens you up. You must have a nice car, yeah? What kind of holidays do you do? You live local, or do you have somewhere posh? At first I laugh it off, think it's a bit of banter, but it keeps coming, politely lodged like a wasp in your tea. Now, I'm not filthy rich. I'm not pretend poor either. I've got a decent job, nice gear, sensible mortgage nonsense, the usual. But I don't volunteer my bank details to strangers over tapas. So when she suddenly says, do you want to go back to mine? And it sounds less like a casual invite and more like an audition question, I get twitchy. She replies, oh, I'll need a lift, car's in for a service. I say sure, old-fashioned pickup. Maybe I'm being considerate. Maybe I'm being boneheaded. Doesn't matter, I go to pick her up. Her address though. That's when the compass needle in my chest starts spinning. I plug it into the sat-nav and notice we're pulling into a proper rough patch. You know the kind I mean. High-rise blocks where the lifts smell of someone else's Monday, shop shutters with graffiti like they've got their own language, the sort of back courts that look like they'd charge a toll for breath. I'm not being snobby, I'm being pragmatic. If you've ever driven through one of these estates at night, you know there's a whole economy of caution that lives there. It's the place where your hair stands up for reasons other than wind. We park. She gets in like she's never paid a parking fine in her life. As we drive, she keeps asking tiny probing things. What kind of phone I have, where I work exactly, who I live with. Little needle pricks. The red flags are everywhere, fluttering like laundry on a windy day, and each time I ignore one because I'm being polite. That was the first stupid decision right there. Then she starts fiddling with her phone. At first I think it's just messaging her mate. She glances up with a smile that doesn't meet her eyes and says, my mate wants to meet one of your mates later. Fine, harmless. But then, and this is where it goes a bit Twilight Zone, I catch a flash of a message on her screen when she puts it face down for a second. I don't look hard, just a glimpse, and there it is, a text bubble that reads, get him back here and get him inside. I swear to you, time goes funny when that happens. The streetlights smear into these long, stupid stars, and the sat-nav's voice sounds proper distant. That text looked like someone had dropped a brick in the boot of the car. My throat gets dry like I've been sucking on gravel. She says, you alright? You look pale. I force a grin and say something daft about needing more sleep. Inside, I'm running through options like a man searching his pockets for his keys. This is the moment you think, what did I sign up for? Is this a scam? A setup? A prank? The more boring but realistic answer is the one that repeats in my head. There's an element here of being used. I remember all those get him back texts you see in those dodgy group chats, the ones where people coordinate meetups and gamesmanship. It's a sucker play, lull someone into a private place, cajole, isolate, maybe rob. Worst case, something worse. You've seen the videos, read the papers. So I play it cool. I steer the conversation onto the absolute blandest topic I can think of, weather, traffic, the film coming out, anything to defuse. I suggest we go somewhere public after, maybe grab a coffee. She laughs like she's on cue, and then, and this is the theater of it, she says, nah, I'm knackered. Just drop me off. She leans back and bats her eyelashes like a West End prop. She's trying to sell me the nothing to see here routine. I don't do dramatic scenes. I'm not a film noir hero. I'm a bloke who's got to make a choice that doesn't end with sirens or me explaining myself in a phone booth. I tell her I'm going to drive her to the Chippy instead, pop in and grab something, stretch my legs. She says fine. We pull into a bright, busy high street with proper lights, shops open, people about. I pretend everything's normal, but my palms have betrayed me and are sweating on the steering wheel. We get out. She wanders off to the shop, and I stand there pretending to look at the pastries, mentally counting heartbeats. I watch her from the window and see her text someone, quick, furtive, then pocket the phone. She comes back with fish supper and a smile, like this was always the plan. I offered to take her home. She says, "No, it's cool. You've been so sweet." I smell the script changing again. I decide I'm not the guy who becomes a punchline. I park up, hand her stuff, and say I'd better go. She gives me a look like she's disappointed, then says, rather casually, "Do you want to come in for a minute? Just to say hi?" That was the line that would have unfurled the evening into 1,000 small regrets. Instead, I laugh a short, brittle sound and tell her, "Nah, I'm knackered. Early start." I mean it. I get in the car, turn the engine over, and as the lights change, I floor it. There's a small, shameful thing that happens in me when I do that. It's not gallantry, it's not romance, it's a stupid private panic. I think of my mom, my mates, the ways people count on you not to be an idiot. So I drive off, hear her call my name half-heartedly, and watch her silhouette between lampposts. I block her number the minute I'm on the A road out of the estate, and swore quietly at myself like a man who's just narrowly avoided a puddle of vomit and still remembers his dignity. "You left for work at 8:13 yesterday." He said it like it was nothing, like he was guessing, and for a second I thought maybe he was good at guessing. Then I realized he was not guessing. He knew, down to the minute. That sentence is what flips you from "this is a weird date" to "this is not okay." We'd been trading jokes and playlists, the kind of surface-level banter that makes a first date feel safe. Matt was funny in a dry way, paid attention, remembered a tiny throwaway detail about a band I liked. He was the kind of person who makes you believe for a moment that the internet can do that thing it promises, connect you to someone who actually listens. At dinner, there was a lull in the conversation, and he just dropped it in, casual as if naming the weather. "You left for work at 8:13 yesterday?" My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I laughed, because what else do you do in public? He smiled that practiced smile, and kept talking like he hadn't said anything. I forced a joke out of it about how my commute was boring, and we moved on, but my skin crawled. I got to my car and sat there for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. Logic said he must have seen something I'd posted, some check-in I'd forgotten, maybe a tagged photo that betrayed a morning routine. But I don't post where I'm going every day. I tidy my privacy settings through muscle memory. The doubt burrowed in like grit. At home I opened the app, because the only honest thing to do was check. I didn't expect anything. I expected a shrug and to forget it. Instead I found a toggle buried under a menu I'd never dug into. Share my location with matches. It was switched on. Not for everyone, not public, just with matches. Under the toggle was a small map with a tiny blue dot blinking. My dot, the faintest possible betrayal pulsing across a screen. I felt it physically, a cold slide down the spine, a dry mouth. How long had it been on? Why had I even clicked it in the first place? My brain replayed the last week, and I tried to remember whether I had tapped through something while signing up, whatever little blur of consent most apps hide in the fine print. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd been an idiot and left a door open. Maybe someone else had figured it out somehow. None of those possibilities helped. I toggled it off so fast my thumb hurt. Then I scrolled back through the app, every bit of data and every privacy option, like a frantic librarian checking the stacks for a misplaced volume. I turned off everything that looked like a breadcrumb. Then I blocked him. At least I could block him, an action that feels good in the moment, a little ceremonial closure. It was a relief and also a hollow piece of relief, because the damage had been done. Blocking him didn't rewind the last week. Blocking him didn't stop the fact that he could have watched my blue dot as it moved from my apartment to the subway to my office. Blocking him didn't remove the hours he might have spent cataloging my routes, learning when I was alone and when I had people around, mapping the mundane geometry of my life until it was a predictable shape. I called my friend Sam, tech-savvy, always patient. He walked me through everything: check account permissions, audit connected apps, see which apps have background location access in the phone's settings. He told me to change passwords, and he told me to enable two-factor for anything that had my personal info. He said the right things in the right order: calm, technical, actionable. That helped. Doing something helped. Action is the only antidote to that inert, sinking dread. But action also has costs. I spent 2 evenings resetting passwords on accounts I didn't even use much. I called the bank to ask about any suspicious logins. I turned off location for half my apps and left only what I absolutely needed. I felt ridiculous and annoyed doing all of it, as if my life had been tucked away and someone had rifled through the folds for fun. Worse than the bureaucracy of safety was the quiet way it changed me. I found myself looking twice at cars parked a block away. I drove different routes home on purpose, the kind of paranoid choreography that takes up space in your head. A coffee run felt loaded if it deviated from the map I'd given myself, because who knew whether someone had been watching the dot, matching it to bar stools and back doors. It's a small thing, but it reshapes your world. The routes you take, the way you answer a text, the permission you grant to the casual acquaintance who says, "I'll walk you to your car." There was also the indignity of wondering how many others were watching. How many men at other tables could say the same specific sentence as Matt? How many women looked around and felt that tiny microscope on them? That's where the anger buttressed the fear. Not just that some guy could be creepy, but that the tools we use to meet people can make it trivially easy. I tell this one short and blunt, because even now, thinking about it makes my stomach knot. I was in that stupid, restless post-breakup place, a little lonely, a little bored, and convinced that swiping around on Grindr was a harmless way to feel desirable again while I finished a hellish week of nursing classes. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just something that felt alive for an evening. Dumb, but normal. A week into the app, one got the typical noise. The usual flirt, the weird bros, the boilerplate one-liners. Then came an offer that sounded like a shortcut to cash, a sugar daddy. I laughed at it. Old men buying dinners in exchange for dick pics had never appealed to me. But the idea of being paid to keep the lights on while I studied? Briefly attractive. He asked to meet at P.F. Chang's to discuss payment options. I asked for a photo. He sent one. I got up off the couch and shut my laptop. This guy looked exactly like your slovenly uncle who thinks cologne is the same as charm. No thanks. I made a weather excuse and skipped. He never messaged again. A week later I matched with someone else on another app. He called himself Jack. He had a military uniform in a picture, and he seemed normal. Polite. Sharp. He picked me up for a casual hangout, and at first, he was exactly what his photos promised. Tall, nervous cool, good at conversation. His car smelled faintly of cologne and leather. He had an expensive thing about him that made my broke nursing student brain calculate the cost-benefit of everything, which was nasty but honest. We were talking and laughing in the first 10 minutes. I thought we might go to the beach. That's what he implied, but we drove a different way. He asked where I lived. I answered casually. He asked where I worked. I said bits and pieces. He seemed engaged and funny. Then he pulled his phone out and scrolled through a gallery that made my stomach drop. Dozens of pictures of men, a lot of them nude. Not just random Grindr profiles, faces I recognized. He started naming usernames and laughing, like he'd got a hobby. He told me casually that he hooked people up with a client, someone who paid him to bring men to the client, sometimes to perform while the client watched and recorded. He showed me a photo of the sugar daddy. It was the same old man from P.F. Chang's. My breath went quiet. It was the first moment a cartoon bubble should have popped over my head with the word nope, but I'd grown up with that awful polite instinct that tells you not to start trouble. Jack started talking like a salesman, how he recruited, how much people made, how things worked. He told me he'd been planning to meet the old man, and that the three of us were supposed to have been together that night. He said it like he was arranging carpools for a concert. I sat very still and watched my reflection in the car window. Streetlights, blurry, a girl who'd made a stupid choice to get in a stranger's car. We pulled up near a Food Lion, a local place everyone in town knows is sketchy after dark. Behind it is a tangle of side streets nobody crosses alone at night. When Jack said, "My place is behind there," something in me clicked hard and clean. That's the kind of phrase the second act of a horror movie is built on. I told him flat out I wasn't going there. He shrugged like it was no biggie and kept driving a little further into the same area, like testing me. Fear does a funny thing. It jumbles your options and makes each one worse than the last. I thought about jumping out then and there and walking. I imagined being shot for the embarrassment of getting out of a stranger's car at night. I imagined his reaction if I fought him. I thought of my family and how stupid I'd have felt explaining the smart choice that had gotten me murdered. So I did the thing that felt like choosing the lesser of two horrors. I ordered him to turn the car around and drop me at home. I told myself over and over, "Don't give him your address. Don't be an idiot." He asked out of nowhere, "Are you afraid of guns?" I was weirdly flippant at first. "Me? Are you?" He laughed like it was a joke. I played along because people play along when the stakes are unclear. Then he said, "Give me a favor before I drop you off." It was casual. It was the softest kind of command. The demand was razor clear, perform something sexual. and suddenly there was no longer any room for my usual polite excuses. I froze because I was terrified in a way that makes your limbs useless. The adult part of my brain had a checklist: call someone, pull the door handle, jump out, while the animal part shrank and obeyed. He told his demand like he was asking for directions. I remember the exact dull overhead light when I looked at him and realized he was not in a bad mood. He was pleasant and steady in a way that made it worse. Pleasantness, in that moment, was a threat. I performed the act because I had convinced myself, quickly and darkly, that this was a survival calculation and not something I had chosen. I wanted to live. I wanted my name on the next day. When he finished, he was lighter, almost chatty, like we'd both done something practical. He dropped me at home and smiled. Thanks. God, what a jerk. You ever worked a shift where you walk home thinking, that could have been it. That could have been the night I should have learned to move to Alaska? Yeah, me too. This is one of those nights. Let me tell you, like I'm back home on the lakeshore, sipping a cold one after a long Saturday, blunt, plain-spoken, and a little raw. I was 20-something, barely legal, nursing textbooks shoved in my bag, and a name tag that still had a corner peeling. I worked at this no-frills steak joint off the highway, the kind of place with a neon beer sign that clicks on like it's making a commitment, and a smell of grease that gets in your hair. Friday night was busy, the kind of steady churn that makes you feel useful and broke all at once. He sat at the bar for hours, just sort of watching me like he was trying to solve a jigsaw with my face. He was older, good-looking in that, maybe his orthodontist knows his mortgage kind of way. Not in a creepy do I know him way, but in a comfortable, practiced way. He smiled a lot. That smile, little practiced smile, teeth, nothing wrong with that. Only his eyes didn't do it. His eyes sat there like frozen carp. You know how you can tell when someone's truly smiling? The eyes crinkle. This guy's eyes were smooth, like canned peaches. That little detail started performing a jig in the back of my head, but bills gotta get paid, so I smiled back and poured another round. He asked me out after his second bourbon. Asked me real nice. You want to grab a beer tomorrow, sweetheart? I should have said no. But I didn't. I told him sure, like I tell half the regulars sure when they ask for extra ranch. It was easier. I was tired. I figured, what's the worst? A drink, a story, some tips. Next night I walked into the little bar I liked. Not fancy, just a place where the bartender knows your name, and there's always a bench outside to catch the last of the sun. I wasn't even 5 steps in when I saw him. The dude from the steak place, with a beer waiting like he'd been there since dawn, ready to play host. Little red flag. Like one of those flags on the lake that says no wake, and you ignore it anyway. He waved, said my name like we'd been pen pals. I sat as far away on the bench as the wood allowed. There was a crowd, a slow hum of people, and a guy on a guitar doing bad Fleetwood Mac. He'd managed to snag the back bench, the kind that backs up to nothing but a low fence and a stretch of parking lot. Smart move. Isolates you. Little chess pieces. He man-spread. Classic. Leg inches closer. Leg grazes mine. I angled away like I was avoiding a splinter. I cradled my whiskey sour like it was my last honest thing. I had a cigarette in my hand on his side, deliberate. He kept leaning. Keep your hands curled around your drink when you don't want someone to read you like an open book. If my mama was here, she'd say, "Girl, you're being polite for no reason." She'd be right, as usual. Conversation started normal. Small talk, the kind you trade with people who smell like Old Spice and have a dog they think is the smartest thing on earth. He got up for another beer. Came back with 2. "This one's for you," he said. I'm not a total cold-hearted Minnesotan, or whatever, but I didn't touch it. I slid in a nah, I'm fine, like I was offering him the polite brush-off. He didn't get it. Out of nowhere he goes, "You know, I have real bad anger problems. I'm kind of a..." And he used a word that landed like a slap in a church on Sunday. I laughed, like you do when a man tries to be mysterious. "Ah, so that's what's up with you," I said. He folded, went quiet, like someone turned down the volume on a radio. Then he flipped it back on with a hum that made the hair on my arm stand up. "You can't just say that," he snapped, voice soft but sharp. "You can't say I'm like that and not mean it." Then he got into this whole monologue about loving me, about how I was sleeping with other men, how I was using him. I blinked. I said calmly, "I didn't mean to offend you. I gotta go. I don't think a second date's a good idea." You could have cut the silence with a butter knife. He stood up, punched the fence that kept the patio separated from the street, hard enough that I heard the crack in my bones, and stomped back inside. People looked at me, I kept smiling. I lit a cigarette, because what else are you gonna do when your chest is doing that drum roll thing? Hope. He comes back out. He starts yelling, this big booming thing about my heart and how I'd broken it, and then like a switch, he's accusing me of using him for money. I'm thinking, buddy, I gave you $10 of my own and walked away. I just wondered how stalking had become a thing in a reasonable human brain. The bouncer was close by. I'd worked with those guys, they were family. I tried to stand up, make myself be an adult. But inside I was clutching my bag like a lifeline, thinking of the 20-minute walk to my apartment, the corner where no one ever stops to ask if you're okay. What if he waits? What if he follows me? That's when I did a dumb brave thing and a smart brave thing at the same time. I handed him $10. Sound stupid? Maybe. But it shut him up for a second and bought me time to clear my head. Thanks for the beers, I said like I was a polite Midwesterner in a Sears catalog. Then I made it to the bathroom and stalled. 15 minutes of stall, blowing my hair, pretending to check the mirror, breathing so slow it should have been illegal. When I finally peered back out, he was gone. I walked up to the bouncers, they know me, I know them, asked if he'd left. They told me they'd kicked him out for following me, and that he'd threatened to stab me. I felt like someone punched me in the gut. My throat went dry. I called my friend, a big dude who's more muscle than reason, and said the words that felt like admitting to being small and mortal. Can you walk me home? He came, like a knight in a flannel shirt. We walked our normal route slow, my hands in my pockets, pretending the world wasn't a little tilted. The second he slid into my passenger seat like he owned it, my stomach dropped into my shoes. Not because he was big or loud, he wasn't, but because he was already comfortable where I live. That's the terrible part, the familiarity. The way he knew the turns before I did. The way he didn't even ask. My name's Lena. I don't do impulse things, not lately. I met Tyler, and when he suggested a daytime meet, I said yes. Daytime dates feel safe. They feel like a floor you can stand on. We met on a cloudy Saturday. The cafe sat on a sleepy block between a plant shop and a laundromat that always had one flickering light. He was exactly what his pictures promised, a soft smile, a beige jacket, jeans that had seen a few good years. We talked about movies, his dog, and the sandwich that ruined him emotionally. He was easy to be around. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, because that's how you are when you want people to be kind. After an hour, I packed my bag and we walked out together. I should have flagged the tiny things then. The way he glanced at the street signs like he knew them, the way his eyes studied the block like he'd memorized it. But I chalked it up to a guy who liked to know his way around the neighborhood. We cut through a side street toward where I'd parked. He offered to walk with me and I, stupidly, accepted. When we got to the car, I pointed and said, "There it is, over by the meter." He didn't say anything. He didn't drift or hesitate. He slid into the passenger seat. No question, no boundary. It felt like a small violation, a polite trespass. I told myself to shrug it off. People are awkward sometimes. I started the car and we pulled away. At first it was fine. He chatted about an obscure band, told a stupid joke, and I laughed, feeling the old easy click. Then he leaned forward, soft, casual, and gave directions. Turn left here. Go straight, till the gas station. Take the third right after the stop sign. They were small, specific. They weren't the kind of directions you give a stranger. They were the kind you give a driver who's familiar with the target. I thought maybe he was mapping out a scenic route. I kept driving. The streets narrowed, then widened. The shops thinned. Houses grew closer together. Somewhere around the third turn my brain started to register the unease. These were the roads that led toward my building. Ones I'd never mentioned out loud. He kept giving directions like he'd been on this route before in the passenger seat of other cars. When I realized where we were headed, toward the block where my building sat, toward the exact stretch of curb with my building's number, my breath got ragged. I didn't say anything. Saying anything felt like throwing a switch and flipping the mood into something worse. I looped the block instead, pretending not to hear him. He suggested a place to stop, an excuse to get out and breathe. I said I had to run an errand, that I'd be right back. I lied because lying at that moment felt safer than explaining my rising panic. I parked at a busy strip mall and told him I needed to go inside for a second. He didn't try to follow at the door, which should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. I stood in the fluorescent light of the grocery store for 15 minutes and fought the urge to pop out and drive away. When I finally stepped back outside, my car was where I'd left it and he was gone. No sign of him anywhere. No suspicious van idling nearby. For a flashing second I considered chasing him down the block, calling him out, making a scene. But the city is a crowd and I was alone in it. Instead I sat in my car with my hands clenched on the wheel and cried once, a short, hot sound that felt like letting a balloon leak. When I got home I locked the door and sat on my couch with the engine still running in my head. I checked my messages, nothing. I scrolled his profile and noticed his pictures were the same ones I'd seen before, smiling and harmless. I hesitated and then opened my app to check our chat. He'd sent one message later that night, a casual, nice to meet you, smiley face, and then nothing. The next day his profile was gone. Poof. Not unmatched, not deactivated, gone like he'd evaporated. At first I felt relieved. No more messages, no more sight of him. That should have been the end. But the absence felt like a neat erasure of evidence. He'd been there in my car, steering with a confidence that felt too practiced. He'd known which turn led to my building. He hadn't asked for my address. He didn't need to. I called a friend and told her everything, breathless and aghast. She asked if I'd called the police. I hadn't. There was no broken window, no immediate assault, no direct threat. But the sense of being located, that someone could so easily find where I lived, sat with me like a stone. I filed a short report anyway, because doing something felt less helpless than doing nothing. The officer was patient, typed in the details, gave me a report number and some standard safety advice. Vary your routes, don't go alone at night, keep a friend updated. Practical, solid, and a little hollow. That week I rerouted everything. I took different streets to work. I walked a friend's dog every evening, so I'd have company. I started parking in different lots and paying attention to license plates like it was a new job. I slept with my phone on my chest and kept the door chain latched even when I was home. Little changes. Defensive choreography. They felt stupid and necessary all at once. There's a strange corrosion that happens after something like that. You don't always recover your old default of openness. I find myself saying no to rides, even from people I know. I'm careful who I let walk me to my car. I scan faces in crowds the way you scan for a spilled banana peel, instinctive and wary. Sometimes I replay the drive in my head, wondering, was he mapping other people that day? Did he ride with other women before me? Was he practicing that calm voice of familiarity because it works? You ever have that weird, sick feeling, the one that lives behind your ribs, telling you something's off, but you talk yourself out of it because you don't want to be the drama? That's how this whole thing started for me. I want to tell it clean and fast, because I learned the hard way that the small, stupid choices add up. Also, full disclosure, this contains adult language and a moment or two of NSFW tension, but nothing pornographic. It's YouTube friendly because it's about surviving and learning, not glorifying violence. Here we go. After being in an 8-year nightmare of a relationship, I finally managed to get out. If you've ever escaped something like that, you know leaving feels like climbing out of a car that's rolled down a hill and somehow stopped in a ditch. You're alive, you're scraped, and the world smells weirdly like new things. I was ridiculously hungry for normal, dinner and a movie, someone who could tell a joke and not turn it into a trap. So when I met him online, let's call him Daniel, he was at first a godsend. Clean-cut, friendly, late 20s, a job where he wore polos and sounded reliable on the phone. We went to dinner at a local place. Yes, I Googled him because hello, boundaries. And he told me about his job, his gym routine, how he'd just gotten back on his feet. He laughed at my jokes. He played with his fork in the charming way people do on first dates. For a while, it was exactly what I needed, safe, boring, and boring felt like a victory. Then things got complicated. Real quick. A month in, subtle shifts happened. He started commenting, casually at first, about where I was, who I texted, why I needed so much alone time. Why didn't you answer my text? Would become, over time. Who was that guy you were talking to? He'd say it like it was curiosity, but the tone would harden. Then came the insisting. Text me where you are. Send me a picture. He would do this smile where he looked like a puppy, and then the next minute, like someone who'd swallowed ice. I chalked it up to insecurity. You do that. You tell yourself you're the reasonable adult, and this is a phase. And in many ways it was manageable. Clingy messages at 8 p.m., a few jealous comments. I told myself I was stronger than my fear, and I could set sturdy boundaries. I tried. I said no. I left the apartment for an afternoon with friends, and texted him a photo of me laughing. He didn't like the photo. He texted, "Are you trying to embarrass me?" with 3 question marks. Then the real red flags arrived. Not emotional whammy flags, Actual metallic, clanging red flags. He showed up at my place unannounced once. Drilled on the door like he was delivering a package. At first he said he wanted to help with a leaky pipe. He wasn't asking, he was deciding for me. He'd come over and stay longer than I invited, lounging like he lived there, moving my coffee cup to the exact spot he liked. He started asking for pictures of who I was with, what I was wearing, what I was doing. The little questions opened the door to real control. I broke it off. It was messier than I expected. He cried. He promised it would change. He said things that sounded sincere if you were hearing them in the grainy half-light of wanting to believe. I told him I couldn't do it anymore. He said he'd respect my space. I went on with my life. I thought that was that. But then he came into my house when I was sleeping. Picture it, night, my apartment quiet, my kid asleep at his dad's for the weekend. I was in bed, the window cracked for summer air. The sliding door to the patio had a screen closed, like I always left it. I had taught myself the little adult rituals. Lock doors, check for lights, make sure the dog's bowl is full. The rituals of people who want to be safe but don't want to live in fear all the time. There are a few ways to tell a story. I could give you the cinematic version. I'll give you the truth. The noise was small. A wait. The mattress dipped and I blinked into dark and realized it was not my son. It was not a house cat. A person was on my bed. He'd let himself in, come through the patio, and slid into my room like he had a right to the space. He sat down like he belonged there. There was no dramatic entrance, no pointing, just the creepiest ordinary of things. "What the hell are you doing?" I whispered, which is the dumbest question you can ever ask when there's a man in your bed. He answered in this low, calm voice. I needed to talk. I would have sworn then that his voice was the softest thing I'd ever heard, the voice of someone who'd learned manipulation from the school of nice men. He proceeded to explain his reasons, which mostly boiled down to a version of, "You don't get to push me away," packaged in pseudo-affection. He reached toward me like he meant to pull me into an embrace, and then, when I said clearly no, you need to leave, he slid off the bed and left through the way he got in. I did none of the things the articles tell you to do in those moments. I didn't call 911 at 3 a.m. I didn't barricade myself. I did the dumb human thing. I froze, I checked on the locks, I double-checked the screens. I lay awake for hours waiting for the sound of his footsteps that never came. Why didn't I call the police that night? I was scared of escalation. I feared retaliation. I figured maybe if I kept my head down, if I didn't make a spectacle of it, he'd be done. That decision haunted me. It should not be shamed. People make choices in terror. But it did teach me how important it is to have a plan and someone you trust on speed dial. He left me alone for a while. I blocked all his numbers. I changed my locks. I told my friends exactly who he was. I made sure someone slept over once in a while, little fortifications. But the mental exhaustion of that night lingered like bad weather. Years pass. You move past immediate fear if the threat stays distant. You breathe. You say the words, "I am safe," until they sound less like an aspiration and more like a fact. Then 2 years later, in the weird, flinny way life hands you surprises, I saw his face in the news. There's a kind of freeze that happens when you see news about violence connected to someone you almost trusted. The headline said he'd been arrested on suspicion of murdering his girlfriend. I remember sitting down and trying to breathe through it, because all the scenarios my brain could imagine were worse than any of them. People asked me if I felt guilty. They asked if there was something I could have done that would have stopped it. Those are knife questions. I don't have the hubris to think my actions alone could have changed another adult's violent choices. But of course I wondered, did I miss signs? Could I have warned someone? Should I have called him out more forcefully? That guilt nibbles at you even though you know it's irrational. Survivors are often asked to carry a weight that isn't theirs to carry. I grew up out past Lolo, went to school in Missoula at the University of Montana, and for a long while I figured people were basically decent. Then Tinder showed up on my phone, and that whole comfortable idea got a little cracked. I was 19, awkward as a calf in the Springs, fresh into the server life at a little diner off Brooks Street. I'd just gotten comfortable with my jokes, learned how to carry a tray without wobbling, and felt like I was finally not invisible. I'd come out, was still finding the shape of who I was, and my confidence had that skinny, clumsy kind of growth you get in spring, promising, fragile, and a little prickly. So when a guy matched with me on Tinder, 21 good smile in his pics, said he was into hiking and had a truck, I thought why not? Montana folks like fresh air and open trails. He seemed like that breed. His name was Ben. Normal. Nice enough. Our first date was the kind that makes you think maybe the internet's not a garbage fire. We met at a coffee shop on Higgins Avenue, the old brick place with the crooked sign that smells like espresso and promise. We walked the Clark Fork later and talked about dumb little things. What we wanted to eat when we were old, favorite songs, the best place to watch a storm roll over the Bitterroot Range. He was funny in the right ways, awkward in the ways I liked. After a few weeks of dates that were more laugh than warning, we started seeing each other steady. Nothing dramatic, movies at the Wilma, late-night nachos near the campus, him dropping me off at my place on South Avenue. I thought I'd found a buddy. Then about a month in, things shifted like the weather in Glacier, fast and without much warning. One day he was warm and goofy, the next he'd go quiet for stretches and the silence felt thick, heavy, like snow before it falls. He'd get this look like a wind that hadn't let up, and then snap into anger over the smallest things. A joke he didn't like, me answering a text late, the way I took too long picking a movie. It was so small at first I chalked it up to him being moody, to hormones, to the pressures of our part-time jobs. Montana winters taught me patience. I thought the storm would pass. It didn't. I started seeing the red flags I'd laugh about with my roommates later. The slammed doors, the speed on Reserve Street when we were driving home, the way his smile could go flat like frozen asphalt. I remember one night, we were supposed to go out for burgers in downtown Missoula, and he pulled into a parking garage and went mute. No reason. I asked if he was okay. He barked at me to shut up. That sort of silence is louder than anything. It set me on edge. I left. I walked the half-mile to a 24-hour cafe, called an Uber, and blocked him after I got home. Felt like closing a door on a skittish horse. That should have been it. Blocks and boundaries were the adult things we were taught. But people don't always respect the little fences you put up. 2 weeks after I told him I was done, I found a necklace hanging from my car door handle. It was the cheap one I'd given him on a whim, a little moon pendant I'd joked cost less than a pack of gum. I'd kept one like it in my jewelry box. I had the same exact necklace. Half my body said, maybe he came by to apologize, and the other half, the part that knows when the ground smells wrong, felt that cold prickle in my neck. A necklace on your car handle is a small thing with a big voice. It's not a shout, it's a whisper that says someone knows where you live, that they were close enough to touch your property, to leave a thing that belonged to both of you as if it were their right. I felt naked. I thought of all the long walks home I'd taken alone, the times I'd left late after a closing shift when the streets by the river smelled like beans and diesel. I started checking mirrors twice, leaving lights on, walking with my keys in my hand. I told my roommate, and she helped me change the locks when I could. I told myself I was being dramatic. I wasn't. Then the weirdness got worse. He called my phone once or twice after I blocked him, using burner numbers. I'd answer in the middle of a shift at the diner and feel my face go hollow. I just want my necklace back, he'd say in this weird, ordinary tone, like I'd stolen his gold. I set the phone down. I didn't tell management because I didn't want my job turned into a paper trail of my paranoia, but that was the kind of fear that eats at you in the wee hours of a Montana night, slow, dogged, and quiet. A couple weeks later, I was at work and picked up the phone. It was him. This time he'd apparently figured out my schedule from the time I posted on Instagram, or maybe he'd watched me. I don't know how he got it. He started asking about the sweater I was wearing, what table I'd waited on. My stomach dropped like a fishhook. I was shaking so bad my hands looked like they belonged to someone else. After I hung up, I told myself I'd be fine. I went back to serving omelets like a robot. I was terrified someone would figure out my home address and come around. It's all these little normal things, eggs, coffee, a customer's complaint about the hash browns, and the fear sits underneath them like a rock. My sister, God bless her, she's a straight shooter from Bozeman, got wind of what was happening. She's the kind of woman who once told a bear to get lost, and the bear respected the authority, metaphorically speaking. When I told her about the necklace and the calls, she went nuclear in the best possible way. She messaged him on one of his accounts. She'd tracked it like a ranger tracking a wayward colt, and she told him to leave me alone. No coy niceties. Just back off. I'll never forget the look on my mom's face when she read the messages, like someone had come into the kitchen wearing mud boots, stern and ready. Initially, he refused to back off. He argued like it was a negotiation at the farmer's market. My sister texted him again and said she would call his mom, his employer, whomever. She told him she worked with people who'd file a restraining order for less. I don't know the exact words she used. I was hiding behind a doorway trying to be brave, but it worked. She scared him. Maybe she made him aware that in Montana, if you make someone's life miserable, folks will come swing the hammer. Or maybe he realized he'd overstepped, and the risk of losing face was too big. Either way, he backed off. He stopped calling. The necklace? I never asked for it back. I wrapped it in tissue and put it in a drawer and pretended it was just jewelry. The worst part hit me like a Gulf storm, sudden, loud, and impossible to ignore. I was at the back gate, flashlight in one hand, the metal key cold in the other, and there was that paper under the mat again. For later, in block letters. No name, no nothing. Just the words, like somebody had carved them into my house. I stood there in the humid Louisiana dark, humidity sticking to my skin, and I could feel my heart thudding so hard it sounded like Cajun drums. How did I get here? Back up with me a minute. My name's Claire, born and bred in Lafayette, Bayou baby through and through. I don't scare easy. We grow up with the sound of frogs and the smell of gumbo on Sundays. We learn to tell ghosts from mosquitoes. So when Tom slid that little black box across the table, I laughed at first. It was a Sunday lunch at a spot-off Magazine Street, garlic bread that could make a grown man cry, and a jukebox that played Muddy Waters at noon. When he set the box on the table, I opened it like most folks would, curiosity, a little thrill. Inside was a single silver key with a sticker on the head. Just numbers. No engraving, no ribbon, no cutesy card. It's for later, he said, like that explained everything. For later what? For later when we fall in love? For later when I'm brave? For later when he decides he's collected me like one of them trinkets they sell in the quarter? I should have asked. I didn't. For some reason, call it Southern manners, call it not wanting to make a fuss, I slid the key into my jacket pocket and let the joke sit between us. We spent the afternoon laughing about small stuff. He liked Zydeco, hated kale, and told a story about a road trip down to Grand Isle where his car broke down and a man named Reggie fixed it with duct tape and a prayer. It was all casual, right up until he gave me that look he gives to the waitress when she comes with the check, calm, like he'd set a little plan into motion and expected it to work. I got home with the key in my pocket and thought little of it that night. Next morning, a car I don't recognize parked down the way like it was watching my house. I scrubbed the coffee pot and told myself to hush. In Louisiana, we don't let fear run our lives, but we also don't ignore the small things. The car left. I relaxed. I was wrong for relaxing. 2 days later, I found a folded note under my doormat, for later. That's when the joke stopped being funny. I tucked that paper into the drawer with my coupons and the receipt from last Mardi Gras and tried to sleep. The breeze off the bayou wasn't soothing that night. My mind kept untangling the loops until I couldn't. Tom stopped answering. He read my messages, but no reply. That little silence is loud, louder than any spoken threat. Then the gate. One night I come home, and the back gate hangs open like someone walked through, didn't bother to close it. My knees went weak. I walked the yard slow as a cat, eyes on the dark, flashlight slicing the silhouette of my hydrangeas. Nothing taken. Nothing rearranged. Just the gate, open like a mouth somebody left ajar. And then the text at dawn, the one that swallowed me whole. Did you try it yet? No sender name. Just those words. I could feel my mama telling me to call the police, but you gotta understand. The police hear all sorts here, and sometimes they say the same thing any sensible person would say. Keep your doors locked. Gather evidence. Advice is fine, but it doesn't fix how small you feel when someone reaches for a piece of your life and calls it a token. So there I was, the worst part, paper under the mat again, key in my palm, the gate creaking like an old song. The fine Louisiana night pressed on the backyard like a blanket. Cicadas were loud enough to drown out the town's radio, and up the street a dog barked like it knew something. I crouched down, picked up the paper with 2 fingers. The ink looked fresher than last time. Whoever left it wanted me to know they could be here whenever they pleased. Here's the thing, that key is nothing and everything. Keys are promises. They're invitations. The key could open a storage locker in a strip mall 2 towns over. It could fit a mailbox or a back door of some shared house where Tom keeps mementos. It could be blank. My head ran the possibilities like a preacher running verses. None of them made me breathe easy. I called my brother, because in Louisiana family is the first line of defense. He drove right over with 2 cans of spray paint and something that looked like a crowbar. He laughed at first when I handed him the key, that big dumb laugh like a man trying to be brave. I told him the story. His face got quiet. We're changing the locks, he said. Simple. Solid. True as cornmeal. We did the sensible things: new deadbolt, motion lights, a Ring camera that recorded neighbors' dogs and the occasional raccoon. I put the key in a shoebox and shoved it under a stack of cookbooks on the top shelf of my pantry. Out of sight, out of mind, I hoped. But the worst parts keep you awake. You imagine him standing there watching you tuck the key away. You imagine him testing a lock somewhere with the same silly sticker number. You imagine the "for later" meaning anything he wants it to mean. Makes your mouth taste like pennies. I thought about confrontation. Jill, my neighbor from down the street who bakes the best pralines, said to me, "Go back to that cafe, tell him you don't tolerate nonsense." I wanted to. There's a part of me that dreams of walking back into that place and slamming his phone flat on the table, demanding answers, making him account for every mean little thrill. But I'm from here. We keep our tempers and choose our fights. And truth, I was scared that calling him out would get him to say the thing that circles in my head like a buzzard. Some folks want a reaction more than they want anything else. My name's Aaron. I work in design. I collect sneakers the way other people collect stamps, and I live in a third-floor walk-up that smells like old coffee, and the one time my neighbor tried to fry fish in January. Kelly showed up on my phone like a palate cleanser, big smile, freckles, thrifted style that made her look like she'd walked off a millennial fashion blog. We chatted for a couple days. Music, dumb food opinions, the inevitable pineapple on pizza debate. She said she hated clubs, loved vintage, and liked the same stupid band I do. It was easy. First date went fine. Tacos, 2 beers, a walk past the river. She was funny, quick-witted, the kind of person who can riff and make you snort laugh in public. We clicked. After the second date, she started coming over more. At first it was nothing. A hoodie borrowed because she said she was cold, a pair of sweatpants because hers were messed up after some shift at work. No big deal. You let someone borrow a thing or two. People do. Then something shifted slow and small, like water eating away at a metal hinge. I noticed a missing box first. I keep my shoes in their original boxes stacked across a shelf in my closet. It's tidy, it means something to me. I went looking for a pair of Dunks for a friend's birthday, and the box was there, empty. I told myself I'd misplaced them, that I'd left them at a buddy's place after some party. But when I checked the photos from the drop, the exact lacing pattern, the scuff by the heel, there was a listing in a resale group. My exact pair, photographed in my bedroom. My stomach did that slow drop. The listing had a username that didn't match any of her accounts, but the profile picture? A cropped hand holding a shoe. The background of the shot showed my carpet, the little stain by the nightstand. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the screen like it might cough up an explanation. It wasn't one or two things. It became obvious after a couple weeks. A pair of Yeezys gone, a leather jacket I'd saved up for missing, a couple of graphic tees I'd bought from small brands. Not my cheap stuff, not my old college hoodies, the rare, the collectible, the things people notice and pay for. The items were popping up on eBay and in private reseller groups under a woman's handle that never included her real name. Each photo had that same composition, items laid out in my apartment, a corner of my room visible like a signature. I started replaying every visit in detail. She'd ask to use the bathroom, and I'd go make coffee. She'd ask to charge her phone and leave it plugged in, casually trolling my closet when I turned to stir the pot. Once she said, "Do you mind grabbing us beers from the fridge?" And I left the room, and when I came back she was touching the top shelf of my closet, fingering the box tops like a cat. Every small courtesy felt like leverage in hindsight. The first time I confronted her, I caught her in the act, my flannel on her arm, a suitcase half-zipped with my jacket peeking out. She had the audacity to look embarrassed for a second, then switched to the "oh God, I'm so sorry" face. She blamed forgetfulness, confusion, said she'd bring things back. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to be the reasonable adult who doesn't escalate because a human being made a mess of themselves. I told her not to do it again and tucked her apology away like a receipt. 2 days later, I saw the jacket listed online for triple what I'd paid. Same fold, same faint bleach spot on the seam. The seller's description, "gently loved, rare find," sat on my chest like a weight. Gently loved didn't feel like an honest label for something she'd lifted while I made coffee. It read like a performance. I could have called the cops then. I thought about it. You hear the usual worries. No receipts, half the stuff was thrifted originally, and you never know how the paperwork will look. The stuff wasn't priceless in a way that would get law enforcement moving quickly. It was just valuable enough to hurt. So instead I did the petty but smart things first. I changed my locks. I started keeping my better pieces in a locked wardrobe that required both a key and patience. I created separate boxes for the pairs that mattered and hid them at friends' places when I went out of town. I pretended it didn't alter my life, but it did. It changes you when you stop wearing the flannel you loved, because maybe she'll recognize it and smile like she's won something that's mine. Then I saw the seller's page properly. It was all her, not just a cropped hand but angles that matched how she styled posts, the little flourish in the corner of every shot. The username wasn't her real name, but it was clearly curated. She'd taken photos in my bed while I was in the next room, the light through the window showing the same curtains I have. It felt like someone had photographed me without asking permission. I texted her, no accusations at first, because I wanted to be sure, but the exchanges were thin and defensive. "I forgot to bring those back," she said. "I meant to give them back next time." Next time never came. Her visits tapered a bit, then stopped. I told myself that was the end. I told myself I was being dramatic, that people take liberties sometimes and you move on. But the internet kept telling me I was right. I reported a few listings to the platforms. I messaged the reseller groups, asking if anyone had bought from that account and suggesting they look at the item's provenance. One guy replied that he'd seen the jacket in a local thrift store earlier, which tangled everything worse. Did she resell quickly? Did she already have a network? How many times had she been through my place, picking, selecting, and photographing like she was curating a show? The anger that rose in me wasn't cinematic. It wasn't about the money, though I wasn't blind to that. It was the betrayal. Having someone inside your home, someone you let in because you trusted them, turning that into inventory felt like theft and violation at once. It's different than mugging. This is domestic. This is intimacy weaponized. I told two friends. One texted a list of attorney general numbers like I was suddenly taking on small-scale organized crime. Another told me to be careful about confronting her in public because people escalate when backed into corners. Both gave practical advice. Gather proof, screenshot listings with timestamps, save messages. So I did. Screenshots stacked up like receipts. I saved the photos. I documented everything. It made me feel less powerless. The final straw came when I caught a live auction. Someone listed my leather jacket in a local marketplace and scheduled it for pickup. I messaged the buyer asking about authenticity and slipped in a line about where the photo was taken. He replied like most people do when their new purchase is complicated. Bought it from someone locally, no idea. I tracked him down and asked about pickup. He sent the address and I sent my friend because I didn't want a scene. We went to the listed pickup and found a studio apartment cluttered with boxes. Inside on shelves were pieces of my life arranged like trophies. A pair of Jordans in a box, my hoodie folded neat, the leather jacket draped over a chair. My friend recorded, I called the cops, and they showed up to a scene where Kelly, yes, her, stood with a shrug and a story that sounded like a string of plausible deniability. The cops took reports. The buyer gave statements. Someone returned a few items on the spot because the buyer didn't want the trouble. So it's college, which means your moral compass and your decision-making skills are both running on fumes. I'd been single for a hot minute and dipping a toe into Tinder because loneliness is underrated and horny nights are cheaper with friends. Met a guy who seemed normal enough in texts, decent photos, decent banter, and we agreed to meet at the local bar on a Tuesday because, apparently, we're the kind of people who trust a Wednesday to sober things up. He shows up. Cute, okay. Shorter than his photos, surprise, but he's laughing at the same jokes and orders the same drink I'm nursing, so the chemistry's doing a decent little job. We play bingo of small talk, trade insults about the DJ, and make plans to head back to my place for the end-of-night vibe. Polite euphemism for maybe hookups will happen. Fine. I knew what I was doing. Or so I thought. Fast forward, we stumble back to my apartment building. Roommates are used to me bringing strangers home. They've seen everything from guitar players who smelled like thrift stores to a guy who thought he was a great ukulele player and wasn't. This guy quietly follows me into the kitchen and flops on the couch like he owns the place, which, being a generally non-confrontational person, I at first suffer through because I don't like making scenes. He helps himself to a plate. He chats with my roommates. He's comfortable. I am not. Morning arrives with the house smelling suspiciously of syrup and shame. My roommate, the one with the short temper and the kind of voice that makes guys stop mid-sentence, is in the kitchen flipping pancakes. Apparently she makes breakfast for the whole place sometimes, generous, terrifying, and efficient. This time, though, the vibe is different. She's been watching him through the night, and the look on her face is not a give it a chance look. It's a you've overstayed and the rent's up look. I'm putting on my shoes, trying not to openly panic about whether I should tidy the apartment like I'm about to turn this into a rom-com montage. The guy lounges, oblivious. My roommate walks out of the kitchen holding a plate stacked with what can only be described as the ugliest pancakes. The ones with charred edges, uneven blobs, half-formed circles, the kind that would make a professional ashamed. She walks straight up to him like it's the most normal thing in the world. He looks up. "What?" he says, that confused doofus tone people use when they haven't processed consequences. She raises an eyebrow and tosses the first pancake. It splatters, because of course it does, and lands on his chest like a soggy badge of shame. Silence for a beat. Then she starts in. "Time to go," she says, voice calm and cold. He blinks. She fires another pancake. The kitchen is now a throwing range, and he's standing in the middle of it looking like a guy who lost a slow, soggy war. At first, I'm mortified. I can see the exchange now, me face bright red, desperately hoping the cameras are off, him standing in pancake armor, my roommates losing their minds laughing, in which, to be fair, is the most perfect form of community policing I've ever seen. I want to crawl under the table, but then the ridiculousness breaks the tension like a spoon through satire. He scrambles, flustered and sticky, and grabs his jacket. "I think I'll go," he mutters, in that voice people use when they're being evicted with dignity. Right after a pretty ugly breakup, I did what a lot of folks do when they want to feel alive again. I downloaded Tinder. Thought I'd be harmless and keep it casual, you know? A bit of flirting, a few laughs, nothing serious. I'm 18 at the time, still got that baby face thing going on. People always ask for ID at the movies. So when this 21-year-old matched with me and seemed normal, I went with it. He was cute, not creepy cute, just regular cute. He liked the same dumb bands as me, and said he was into longboard rides down by the lake. Nice guy, I thought. Nice start. We had a month of that getting-to-know-you stuff, movies, a couple of late-night fries at Tim's, the kinds of things that make you think maybe the universe is being kind. Then, without a proper preface, the mood shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. He'd go quiet in the middle of a conversation like someone hit pause and forgot to press play. Sometimes he'd snap, slam a door, stomp away, drive like he'd been dared to. The first time he yelled, I chalked it up to him having a rough day at work. The second time, I started to feel my stomach do the thing it does when a storm's coming. One night, we were heading downtown for dinner. I asked a question, nothing spicy, just something about my day, and he told me to shut the heck up. Full stop. No joking. The car went silent, heavy like a wet coat. We pulled into a parking garage, and he just stopped and stayed quiet. My chest felt weird, like a loon call echoing over a lake. I told him we were done, packed up my stuff, and walked out. I remember the fluorescent light buzzing, and my shoes hitting wet pavement. I walked fast, the whole city was a blur, and found a coffee shop that was still open. Sat in the corner, heart racing like I'd run the Centerpoint Hill twice. I called a friend, got an Uber home, and blocked him. Felt like the right thing, the adult thing. For a few days, I tried to be brave. Then came the courteous creepery. When I walked to my car one afternoon, there was a necklace on my handle. The very necklace I'd given him. He'd been at my house. I'd not told him where I lived. Panic bubbled up the way you get when you hear the coyotes at night, small and insistent and impossible to ignore. That little physical reminder changes your brain. It's not theatrical, it's invasive. You start measuring your steps, checking over shoulders, timing your exits. He had shown up without knocking, without a text that made sense. It was the kind of boundary crossing people warn you about in whispery, anxious tones, and suddenly I was living it. After that, the messages began. Not always from the same account, a couple of blank profile DMs, some that were apologetic, some that threaded guilt into every line. Then one of my friends, bless her, pinged me a screenshot. A DM from him pretending to be someone else, saying, I need to talk, stuff like that. She'd get screenshots from him too. He was everywhere he shouldn't be. I deleted apps, tightened my privacy, told my roommate to always have the porch light on. The worst moment was when I found out he'd been to my workplace. I'd never told him my schedule. I'd never told him my boss's name. One morning, the phone rang at the shop and his voice said something ridiculous about wanting his sweatshirt back. He'd been watching. That broke something. Anger flared first, then fear. My manager was kind and helped me go home early that day. My coworkers rallied. My sister called him, blunt and furious, and told him to leave me alone. He might have stopped because someone called him out, or because he realized this wasn't a game anymore. Either way, I blocked and I changed my routine swiftly after that. I lived on campus then, a freshman or sophomore, somewhere between, I thought ramen was fine for dinner forever, and I should probably go to class more than I don't. Wendell was the town fixture, older, a little rough at the edges, and he sang opera on the corner like he was auditioning for the most melancholy musical ever staged on a sidewalk. He had that talent that makes people drop change in a hat, unexpectedly beautiful given the weather-beaten face. I'd toss him $1 when I had spare change because that felt humane, and also because carrying coins sucks. He'd smile, do a ridiculous impression, and I'd keep walking to class feeling like a civic-minded hero. Spoiler, I was not a hero. We'd chat sometimes, small talk, the kind of civics-grade compassion you pull out when you have 5 minutes and a conscience. Wendell told me little, strange bits of story, almost a baseball scholarship, drugs, bad luck. It was the kind of oversharing that made me tilt my head and give him a shit-eating grin. My professor, bless his suited little heart, spotted us once when we were walking and did the quiet panic thing. He warned me, like many do, that the chronically homeless in this city weren't the friendly buskers back home, and he asked me not to get too involved. I huffed the classic indie student shrug and thought, okay, boomer, and walked away feeling progressive and compassionate and frankly smug. Big mistake. That smugness aged like milk left in the sun. After a few weeks of small friendly chats, Wendell started bringing me gifts. A metal machine part once, a clumsy flower the next. Cute, right? I told myself it was sweet, he's trying to preserve dignity, yada yada. My roommate rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd fall into her cereal. The professor saw it and told me straight, this is leaning into obsession. I ignored that too, because the human brain loves to be right more than it loves to be safe. Then the tone changed. He showed up in weird places. Once he yelled my nickname when I was walking with my advisor, and the advisor's face went pale in that academic way that means, this is an essay I did not want to write. Wendell started popping up at random campus events, the bookstore, the rec center. He knew details, club volleyball, my major, and I felt this small cold thing settle in my gut like a golf ball. I stopped giving him money, stopped smiling as much. I told myself I was handling it responsibly. I thought if I made reasonable boundaries, he would accept them. Silence, I kept telling myself like a prayer. Pandemic hits. Class goes virtual, everyone goes home, I go home, and I think, great, shelter, serenity, Wendell can't follow you through the Wi-Fi. I let my guard down. And then 3 weeks into being home, I'm doom scrolling and I see a video from a friend. The voice in the clip is 100 feet away in the past and the sound swells, and I hear the unmistakable, ridiculous, magnificent tenor of Wendell. At first I think, wow, he's got range. Then I realize the story location is not our college town, but my tiny hometown about an hour away. I blink. My stomach does the thing animals' stomachs do when they sense a predator. Coincidence, I tell myself. People travel. He was in town busking. Breathe. Calm. 2 days later a girl from my high school calls me and says, hey, weird, but a beggar asked about you downtown. He knew your major. I brush it off. Maybe she was wearing college merch. Maybe she was wearing a sweatshirt with our club on it. Sure. I went back to campus later, and there he was, Wendell, standing on his usual corner like nothing had changed. That's when the memory finally kicks me in the teeth. The metal bit, the flower, the way he knew my face in a crowd. My stomach flips over into true alarm. I started doing the normal, sensible things. No small talk, no coins, changed my route, sat with friends. Felt like I was being paranoid, and yet watched for him like a kid watches trains, waiting for that Doppler rumble. He kept coming around. He brought gifts. He remembered details. My advisor, who I'd earlier waved off, spoke to me gently and said something I'd been in denial about. He's fixated. Hearing it put it on paper like a charge, obsession. And then the moment where my life got properly unhinged. Finals ended. I went to visit my brother in a different state. 10 days into the holiday. It's early morning, and I'm woken by voices. My brother is not the whispery type. He's talking at the door, and I shuffle out in my boxers like a sitcom casualty. I peer through the peephole, and I don't recognize the man. Then I do. It's Wendell, cleaned up in a way that would fool anyone who didn't know better. Shaven, trying on ordinary clothes like they might fit. He's smiling the smile of someone who's packed snacks for martyrdom. I freeze. My brother hears the name and, in true brother mode, flips his tone from calm to furious in a beat. You invited someone here? Are you kidding me? He yells. I'm fumbling for an explanation. He's yelling about mom and dad freaking out if he brings home a 40-year-old, and I'm whispering, he's not, I didn't invite him. My brother cracks the door open to tell this man off, and Wendell, who hasn't lost a beat, starts banging on the window screaming about how he had to see me, and that I left him, and some kind of twisted poetry about being my boyfriend. This is where the creepy turns cinematic. He's banging on glass, eyes rolling in a way that's not quite right, and when he punches the window the pane cracks and blood spurts out like something from a slapstick horror movie. The scene is grotesque and surreal. My brother ready to fight, me wanting to disappear, Wendell singing opera as police arrive. Police take him away. He belts out an aria as if he's getting a standing ovation at the Met. I watch him being let off, the song looping like a soundtrack. I feel foolish, awful, validated, and sick all at once. The officers cuff him, and his voice displaces into the distance. Later I learn he'd been following other people too, leaving notes, trying to insert himself into lives. He's institutionalized for a bit, then mercifully moved out of the local sphere. The end? Not really. The story coasts into the messy aftermath. My brother loses sleep, my advisor avoids small talk, and I replay every moment I could have changed. Here's the ugly, useful thing. You are allowed to be kind and still set hard boundaries. You are allowed to be compassionate and also arrange your life so you're not a target. I learned to nod and walk on, to report when things escalated, to talk to campus security, and to call friends when I crossed a threshold of fear. I learned that shame is a brigand that wants to keep quiet and let predators rewrite you as complicit. It's a liar. And the NSFW bit you wanted? Fine. If Wendell had been auditioning for a different part, say the town's gonzo gigolo, his creep factor would still be off the charts. Picture this. Someone singing Puccini while trying to make "Dude, you dropped your dignity sexy." It does not work. Imagine him offering me a metal machine part as if it's a promise ring. I told my brother, if he tries to slide me the "I'll fix your carburetor, pick me up again," we're setting him up with a Tinder profile that says seeks plumbing and emotional stability. Must be willing to pay taxes. We laughed until we were breathless, because sometimes gallows humor is the only form of cardio you can stomach.